Hey guys, Dr. Israel here for the 7th lecture, almost to the end of our personal training course. This one on a very interesting topic, fads and fallacies in personal training. There are lots of them, and in reality, new ones come along, they're marketed, they're sold, they're practiced every week. So, as soon as this video comes out, a week later it will be outdated, and it's all actually a bit outdated already. So this is just a very short list and kind of a sample. So more particularly than the actual fads and fallacies we'll discuss, we'll learn something even more important. A way to think about training and exercise and personal training so that you can spot future fads and fallacies more effectively. And when something comes along and your other trainers in your area or at your gym say, hey, have you tried this? You might give it a little bit of critical thought, do some research, and conclude, you know what, maybe this is not a good idea. Or maybe it is. So let's take a look. So today we'll be looking at training fads, training programs, and training toys, we'll call them, that people use to try to get their clients in shape and it doesn't actually work very well. We'll talk about diet fads. There are lots of them: intermittent fasting, carb backloading, paleo, organic, local, vegetarian, a ton of diets, a lot of which have some good things going for them, but some not so great things as well. Lastly, second to last, we'll talk about motivational fads. Social media posts as a way of attention seeking that doesn't actually work to motivate anyone in the long term. Having others hold you accountable, another big fad in the personal training industry that we're really going to try to break down and learn some fundamentals from. Lastly, very importantly, we're going to cover some basic tools against pseudoscience. Whenever a new claim arrives to you as a personal trainer, hey, I heard I could get my abs toned with this machine. Hey, I heard this new diet works really well to cut fat. What do you think? As a receiver of information, if you're armed with tools against pseudoscience, you could do a much better job than average of figuring out, does this work? Does this maybe not work? Is the jury still out, or is this definitely BS? So we're going to take a look at that. Let's get on our way. Training fads are up first. Some basics. A quick rule of thumb, and this is about as simple of a rule of thumb as it gets. If something makes training very easy, it's probably bunk. I know, that's terrible news. Getting into the squat rack and doing deep, strict reps for sets of 10 stinks. It feels awful, but every bodybuilder on the planet that has big legs does it because it really works the best to grow your legs. If something is squishy, or if you get to stand on a BOSU ball, it turns into a lot of fun and it's really easy and you break a little bit of a sweat, it probably won't get you into really good shape. I know it stinks that this rule has to be our rule of thumb. So, in addition, when we go through these, keep in mind the training principles. A lot of fads violate the overload principle, as stated just above. Some of them violate the fatigue management principles, and others violate specificity all the way down the line. But the ones we're going to talk about violate these principles in particular. And we'll take a look at them in a bit, some examples for you of current training fads. Right? So what are they? BOSU balls, and as I put here, anything squishy. I call them toys. The weight room, the gym, is a place for serious business. It is a place for results. It is a place to get in shape. Thus, our stimulus has to be difficult. We have to provide an overload. If you work with squishy toys and balls and BOSU balls and medicine balls and throw them around and have lots of fun, the overload just isn't there a lot of the time. Another problem with BOSU balls is people like to stand on them or sit on them to do squats and bench presses and other things, and they say, well, that's good because it destabilizes you and your muscles have to work harder in order to keep that stability. That's actually completely false and backwards. It's worse than just wrong. It's the opposite of the truth. It's been demonstrated in the laboratory over and over and over again. If you have a solid base, solid footing, if you are stable, you literally activate more motor units and the more high threshold motor units. You can literally exert more force, contract more muscle, and get a better stimulus. However, if you are unstable, if you're on a rocky surface and you can't get stable, you literally don't produce as much force, and a lot of your muscle stays dormant. It's not even active. It's not turning on. That burns less calories and it builds less muscle. Why? Because your body essentially makes an executive decision. Your brain says, I'm unstable. It would be pretty dangerous to exert myself because I could slip and fall. Ask somebody to get on a sheet of ice for you in the winter and try to jump as high as they can. Their body will not let them try that. You'll automatically be shut off from doing your best work because your body's going to say, I'm just going to get killed if I try to do that, and it's absolutely correct. So when you put somebody on a BOSU ball and have them do squats, you are intentionally limiting their force production, their overload, and the benefit they get out of the movement. Sorry to be the bearer of bad news. You want results? You get on a steady floor and you pick up a barbell and you do work. Squishy fun toys, they're a place for toddlers. That's a cool thing to have in a kindergarten, not for training adults in personal training. Number 2, things like Pilates and yoga. People ask, hey, listen, I do Pilates and I do yoga. Is that good to build muscle or do cardio with? Build muscle? Absolutely, categorically not. There are only a couple of types of yoga that build any significant amount of muscle mass for somebody that's more than completely untrained. And those types of yoga you'll almost never find in any gyms practiced in the United States. Why? Because those trainers, those yoga instructors, yoga masters, can't attract clients because that kind of yoga is way too hard for most people. Guess what? Just like regular training, when it works, it hurts. Real, legit, difficult yoga is almost impossible for people to do because it's painful. Now, if you want to go that route and do that kind of yoga, be my guest, it works great. But almost everything you'll find in a commercial yoga studio is just basically lying around, stretching a bit. It doesn't burn a whole lot of calories, and unfortunately just doesn't work very well. Pilates is kind of a form of yoga for people that aren't even in shape enough to do yoga. And it's oftentimes really watered down. And can you get potentially with a good instructor, a good workout for the Pilates? Yes, those people are exceptionally difficult to find. Almost in every instance. Pilates, for sure, and yoga mostly, is a way to coddle people into thinking they're having a good workout with mostly laying around and stretching and not doing a whole lot of anything. So if your client says, hey, I want to do Pilates for cardio, you say, hey, maybe you should run on the treadmill instead. I promise you, more people have gotten in shape running on treadmills than they have done doing Pilates. Bearer of bad news again. Number 3 of just our sort of tour of examples, using bands and chains. It's another form of toy, to be honest. Bands and chains wrapped around a barbell offer what's called accommodating resistance. As you lower the barbell and more of the band relaxes or the chain falls to the floor, you get less force. And as you're in a position close to lockout to exert more force, the bands and chains follow and you can exert more force. This is great for one kind of athlete. An equipped powerlifter, somebody who competes in powerlifting equipment. Equipped powerlifters invented band and chain training, and not training with bands and chains is probably not a good idea if you're an equipped powerlifter. They're really good tools. For raw powerlifters, bodybuilders, or your personal training clients, they're pretty much not worth the hassle. They don't offer any magic. They just don't. Kettlebells. Kettlebells can be used as good tools in training, but so can dumbbells. And kettlebell swings, I'm not even really sure what they accomplish. A kettlebell swing is something somebody invented, I'm pretty convinced, is a way to move a lot of weight around by using the most momentum possible and using the most tendon reflex possible and actually doing the least physical amount of calorie expenditure. You want to do kettlebell swings? Hire an Olympic weightlifting coach instead and have him teach you how to do cluster sets of 5s in the full clean, or in the full clean and jerk if you want. You do that, you will get in shape faster than you can blink your eyes, but it will be pure, brutal torture. I never see anyone get tortured with kettlebells. Can you use them effectively? Yes, you definitely can. Are they a magical tool that you should definitely use instead of dumbbells and barbells? Do they offer some kind of really special advantage? Absolutely not. And if you want a good kettlebell workout, do some CrossFit type stuff. But I've seen a lot of personal trainers do sets of 5 in the kettlebell swing, put the kettlebell down, and have their clients chat for a bit. Nobody's breaking a sweat, nothing's happening. And they essentially think the kettlebell, just by being there, is somehow going to make their client better. And it's not. It's just a hunk of metal. That's all it does. It has no special advantages whatsoever. P90x and Insanity. These are basically fad programs. You can get them on tape. You do them in your own home. That's where the problem lies. So they have a pretty low variation. There's only one P90x program and only one Insanity program. There's a couple variations, but pretty soon you're doing all the same stuff. So it's a cool way to get 3 months of workouts and get in decent shape, but what do you do after? After, you have to hire a real personal trainer and actually have a progressive program of planned variation. There's another problem. What do you train your legs with in P90x and Insanity? I mean, you got like 20-pound dumbbells with the thing. There's no other way to train your legs unless you have a squat rack or at the very least machines that you can use with heavy, heavy weight. So if you want only an upper body, you can do that stuff. Otherwise, it's not going to cut it. CrossFit, I'll say this, CrossFit is one of the best workouts you can get, period. It is unbelievably difficult. CrossFitters use almost all the right moves. Almost everything in CrossFit is either the hardest stuff from track and field and gymnastics you can think of, or the compound heavy basics for reps. CrossFit is brutal. It will get you into shape. Just a couple of critiques here, though, so that we can intelligently approach CrossFit if you want to integrate it into the training of your own client. CrossFit has poor fatigue management. Good CrossFit coaches will actually have weeks of lower intensity training for their clients so they can recover. Classic CrossFit, which very few people actually do anymore, is just balls to the wall all the time. It's unsustainable, and usually, back in the old days, CrossFit had a really nasty chronic injury rate for its clients. Why? Because there is no deloading. You just go hard all the time, 5 days a week, boom, 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 everything to failure. Pretty soon people fall apart like a Jenga block. So, CrossFit can be modified, and a lot of people are doing this, to include deload weeks, light days, and it actually works rather well. Unless you start saying, well, I do CrossFit for sport performance. CrossFit's a good way to get in general shape, or in shape for CrossFit competition. That's about it. It's not a great way to get in shape for sports, but luckily, you're not going to be working with your clients on sports stuff particularly anyway. So CrossFit is a good base, but watch out for that fatigue management. Watch out for it big time, because it can catch up with you. Functional training. Right? Functional training probably makes close to the least amount of sense of anything on this list, maybe tied with BOSU balls. Functional training, apparently, lifting barbells and dumbbells in straight lines is not functional. Functional is when you put the cable stack in the upper part and chop down with a cable like you're a lumberjack chopping down a tree. Because that's functional. Well, because you know all of your clients are lumberjacks. Or none of them are lumberjacks, which is much closer to the reality. Your client's a lawyer. Their functional training should be writing memos, sending emails, and yelling at people and firing them, if you want to do functional training, all right? Functional training is when you build up the core musculature, quads, glutes, chest, back, abs, lower back. You get brutally strong and strong for reps, and then your clients can lift all the groceries they want, they can move their kids around, they can walk their dog, real functional training. Now, if you want to get even more functional than that, you go to strongman training. All right, you pick up a giant rock and put it on a platform. That's about as functional as it gets. I don't see very many people doing strongman training for functional training. Why? Because it's really brutal and really hard. And a lot of clients will quit. And a lot of personal trainers don't want that, so they'll say, let's do functional training. It applies to the real world better. Here are these easy cable things for you to do. It looks functional, but it's really not. And unfortunately, it gets you the worst of both worlds. It doesn't make you any more functional, and it doesn't get you jacked and lean like you want it. It doesn't build muscle well, and it doesn't burn fat well. If you want real function, the compound barbell basics with a good diet, and you'll get a ton of results. And you'll be plenty functional at whatever it is you do. All right, on to diet fads. Just a sample here and some really quick critiques of pretty common, especially recent diet fads. If we did this in the 80s, we'd have a whole other list of 20 other things that you guys have never heard of, and neither have I. So, just to start with, if it violates the fundamentals of scientific dieting, like we learned about in the last lecture, it's probably a bit off. For example, if it has no attention to the workout window whatsoever in carbs or anything, it might be trading off a little bit of that workout, of that nutrient timing section. If the meal frequency is totally radically off, if there's a diet that's got you eating 10 times a day or else, it's probably wrong. If there's a diet that says you only need to eat once or twice a day and you'll get just as lean and muscular as everyone else, it's probably wrong, or just not going to be as effective as another form of dieting. If the diet attends to the naturalistic fallacy, it's probably wasting your time. The naturalistic fallacy states that just because something is natural, it's likely better for you. Things that are better for you are just plain old better for you. Natural peanut butter is plenty natural, and it's pretty good for you. Artificial sweeteners are completely made in a laboratory, and they're pretty good for you. They don't actually affect your physiology at all, as far as we can tell. So a lot of diets say, do this because it's natural. First of all, a lot of times it's not even natural. The real paleo diet was a matter of getting stabbed by another one of your tribesmen in the ribs, pulling out the stick he stabbed you with, choking him to death, trying to run down a buffalo for 2 days and dying of starvation before eating a couple of berries to finally kill the buffalo or what have you. In the real world, natural dieting was a very sporadic process, not conducive to building muscle and burning fat, possibly burning fat simply because of the massive starvation involved. Even if we have a diet that's more nature-based, nature is not looking out for you. That's a total fad. As a matter of fact, look at the personal training industry. The machines, the air conditioning, the personal trainer, the scientific knowledge, that's all fake. Natural eating is eating everything you can just because it feels good, and that doesn't lead us anywhere good. Don't be addicted to the natural. There's nothing special in it. Things are either good or bad on their own merits. Things are effective or ineffective on their own merits, not because they're natural or artificial. A lot of artificial things are really bad. A lot of natural things are really bad. You can't have a cheat sheet. Sorry, you just have to know the science, know the literature, and do your best with what data you have. There's no shortcut here. So, let's take a look at some current diet fads real quick. Intermittent fasting. Recent diet fad says that you can not eat all day long and then eat just after your workout a couple of times. You have a feeding period, go to sleep, and repeat. So use long periods of fasting. What that ends up doing is leading to a lot of muscle loss. And most people who preach intermittent fasting tend to be really skinny people that haven't accrued a lot of muscle loss. Intermittent fasting is also supposedly sustainable. Most dietitians or psychiatrists would define it as a form of disordered eating, unfortunately. Starving most of the day is not a great idea. And I have yet to meet a lot of people that are very confident that intermittent fasting is a good way to go through work. All right, I'm a doctor. I have to perform surgeries at work. I can't have not eaten for 16 hours. I will mess up my surgery. There are much more sustainable ways and easily as effective ways of doing things without having to starve yourself half the day. Ketogenic diets. Ketogenic diets say carbohydrates are bad, but they're not bad, so that's false right off the bat. People lose weight eating a variety of carb, fat, and protein amounts as long as their calories are set in place. If you eat a hypocaloric diet to lose weight, you can lose weight eating 90% of your diet as carbs. Carbs aren't bad particularly, and if you cut a lot of them, that really unfortunately takes away a lot of the anabolic effects of the workout window, and because your glycogen levels start to drop, you can't produce a lot of energy in the gym and you're going to start losing lots of muscle. Ketogenic diets are also not very sustainable. Why? Try cutting your carbs out completely for 2 weeks and let me know how the cravings go. And remember, you're a fitness professional. Your clients are going to try that, and they're going to have a weekend where they're going to go to some kind of party, an opening party for the new building downtown. And the waitress is going to come by with cookies as hors d'oeuvres, as samplers. Be like, oh, would you like to try this cool new, organic cookie? And they're going to be like, oh, cookie, 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 cookie. And 5 minutes later, they gained 100 pounds because they ate all the cookies in the building. If you do a ketogenic diet, literally one of the least sustainable diets, because it starves you of carbohydrates, it makes you crazy cravings, and it makes your clients really, really prone to a huge relapse. So they're needless, and they increase the likelihood of screwing up on your diet big time. I wouldn't recommend it. Carb backloading. Carb backloading is the idea that you need to eat almost all or all of your carbs after you train. There's some merit to that because it's a workout window. Unfortunately, as it's applied, carb backloading is way too much fat in the workout window, so when those carbs are supposed to get into the muscle cells via insulin, there's hardly an insulin spike at all because you eat 50 grams of fat with that meal, it now turns into a low glycemic kind of carbohydrate release. In addition to that, the fat prevents all those carbs from getting into the bloodstream for hours anyway, so the diet kind of shortchanges itself. And I've seen this diet described as viable for people that train in the morning. So let me get this straight. You're supposed to eat your carbohydrates, we know with the workout window, a lot of them right after training. But if you train in the morning, the carb backloading people still advocate that you should wait till 5 or 6 p.m. to eat most of your carbs. That makes no sense whatsoever. It is literally backwards. If it fits your macros, basically says that if you get your calories in and if you get your macros right, you don't need to worry about anything else. And it's as close of a good diet as we have on this list. It's not terrible. But remember, it's just the first couple of steps. If you get your clients to fit their macros correctly to their calories and get all the protein, carbs, and fats they need, they're well on their way. Even they might be 80% on their way. But why throw away nutrient timing and the glycemic index and all that completely? To the effect that your clients can, they should try to do that stuff at least somewhat. So if you have a client that just trained, you're like, hey, you're going to have some carbs and protein. They go, nah, fit my macros. I'm going to have some pizza later and a whey protein shake with that, and I'll be good for my macros. And they're missing out on the workout window. Is it a huge deal? No. But why intentionally limit yourself? If it fits your macros, is a good start. But it's not enough. We can go further than that. The paleo diet. The paleo diet, unfortunately, radically misunderstands evolution and the evolutionary history of the human race. Humans evolved all over the globe, and there's no such thing as one paleo diet. Sweet potatoes are not magic, unfortunately, and it misses out on post-workout carbs. That's probably the biggest critique. Now the paleo diet, similarly to if it fits your macros, fundamentally is a very good thing. Very few people have ever gotten fat eating or super duper whole grains, or essentially some versions of paleo diet don't eat grains at all. I'll put it this way, very few people have gotten fat eating a low amount of low glycemic carbohydrates, plenty of fruits and vegetables, lots of fiber in their diets, and lots of lean protein sources and healthy fats. It's a good base, but on top of that, you probably want to have a bit more carbohydrate, particularly starchier carbs in the post-workout window, so you can train really hard, get the muscle gains and the fat losses that come along with that. There's no reason to intentionally limit your clients by having them go full out paleo. So paleo is a good backbone, but other things can be added to it. Organic eating. I'm going to put this as straightforwardly as I can. Conclusively has been demonstrated that organic eating does nothing special. They can't even reliably demonstrate that organic food tastes any different than inorganic food or food processed with pesticides, etc. Pesticides in the United States, the way food processing occurs, are essentially exposing people to almost no risk of any diseases whatsoever. The food processing that leads food to become not organic, or not classified as organic, is essentially almost harmless to the point where it's impossible to detect that it's doing anything bad. However, organic food costs like double what regular food does in some instances. Why pay that much for what has essentially been demonstrated through massive literature reviews to be nothing special? I'm not sure. I still have yet to figure it out. So if your clients say, hey, what do you think about organic food? You say, pretty much a fad, and there's really no good reason. You can have organic food if it's cost effective, but there's no reason to go out of your way. And that's a really good answer. Local eating. Local eating is the idea that if you eat locally, it's better for your health and better for the environment. Better for your health has been refuted right along with organic eating. Better for the environment has also been refuted. And it's no better for the economy either. So if you want to eat local and you want to eat bananas, that becomes a real serious problem. Because bananas, to be grown anywhere locally, let's say in the United States, especially in the northern latitudes, most of the year it's impossible. As a matter of fact, all of the year, you need advanced greenhouses, lots of carbon emissions to make the machines that build those greenhouses and maintain that temperature, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, a hugely costly process. Or bananas can grow in Venezuela right out of the ground, more or less for free, and with very minimal management, you can get huge crops and ship them over to the United States. So when people say local eating is better for the world, it's unfortunately quite an unsubstantiated argument, and there's plenty of very good arguments in the other direction. Local eating is not something that should concern your client if they're open-minded. So if they say, hey, what about local eating? You say, well, I'm not sure there's good evidence that that is any sort of advantage, and it's certainly not an advantage to anybody's health. That's a pretty good, straightforward way of putting that one. Vegetarian and vegan, I'll say this. Vegetarian and vegan lifestyles are almost always very, very healthy. And they're very effective at fat loss. I know like 0 overweight vegetarians, and probably so do you. And every single vegan I know is considered considerably underweight. Now, if vegetarians and vegans want to gain muscle, they're going to have to go and be a bit more serious about their nutrition. It's possible, it's just going to be more difficult. But let's put it this way. A well-rounded pescatarian, ovo-lacto-pescatarian, or even a full meat-eating approach with all the principles in mind is just as healthy and just as effective for your clients as vegetarian and vegan eating. So, vegetarians and vegans are absolutely right to live their lifestyle from a moralistic perspective. But if they start making claims like, well, this is the best way to do things for health, they're on very shaky ground. So if your clients say, hey, and I've literally had clients say this, should I try vegetarian to lose weight? Well, unless you want to be a vegetarian for another reason, no. If you think the slaughter of animals is completely immoral, which is an absolutely fine position to have, yes, you should be a vegetarian. But if you're doing it just for the health benefits, it's really not worth it. There are absolutely great ways through eating lean meats, etc., to get all the health benefits of being a vegetarian while actually eating meat. All right, switching gears for our second to last talk on motivational fads. So we've kicked training fads, kicked diet fads, now onto motivational fads. So social media. Some examples of things clients do that they think are good ideas to keep them motivated in the long term. Posting pics of their meals. I'm talking about each meal. We all know people on Facebook that do that. Posting a video of every single training session, not just a PR, literally. Squats, week 1, 3 by 10, 80%. Really boring. Here it is. And you look at how many likes people give you on the video. Great. Posting motivational memes 2 times a day. These people inundate your Facebook, and some of them could be your clients, of, oh, you know, there's a meme of Godzilla destroying a city, and this is how I feel in my workout today, roar, right? So the question is to us, what effect does this have on motivation? Are these things good ideas to do? Because some people will defend them, well, it keeps me motivated to see that feedback. It keeps me motivated to interact like this on social media. I have to post these pictures, I have to post these memes, keep myself accountable, keep myself motivated, etc. Is that true? Well, first of all, it's a sign of excessive attention seeking, which in its own right is a bit of a psychological abnormality. Here's a real big serious fact. Approval of others or from others is a very flimsy thing to base off anything. People were taught this when they were in, 7th grade, that you're not supposed to seek the approval of others as the fundamental reason for doing something. The fundamental reason for doing something is because it makes you happy and it's good for you in the long term. If approval of others is your base for doing something, it won't last. It's flimsy. Approval of others comes and goes. It's not a good, reliable thing to ground your fitness foundation on. If you have a fitness goal, the approval of others, sometimes people like your Facebook pictures a bunch. And another day, the usual people that like your Facebook pictures, it could be a holiday, or some of them didn't get paid as much of the last paycheck as they thought, and they're pissed, or they're not on Facebook, and they don't like your pics as much. And you look at that picture, and it's got only 5 likes, and the last one got 25, and you think, oh my God, am I really backsliding that much? I don't even want to do this fitness thing anymore. It's flimsy. It's not a good foundation to base your results on, or to base your work ethic on. Here's the thing. You'll see a lot of the stuff on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. Why? It's typical of beginner clients, it's typical of beginner trainers to do this kind of stuff, but the long-term successes, they don't do a whole lot of this stuff. They'll post PRs, they'll post things every now and again, but their motivation comes from within, from their own success, not from Facebook and not from the approval of others. So seeking the approval of others does not last. Another huge motivational fad I really wanted to sort of disprove here, having others hold you accountable. I'm sure you guys have heard this before, like, my wife is with me at every meal, and I make sure she sees my weight in the morning, and she makes sure I weigh in, and I don't have those cookies I like, because she's going to hold me accountable. All right, let's figure out where this goes. So it definitely works well in short-term psychological experiments. When this is studied in the laboratory, having somebody hold you accountable works really well, because you want to do a good job. You don't want to embarrass them. You don't want to let them down, right? In the long term, it amounts to very little with painful goals. Here's what I mean. If the only reason you're not eating a brownie at night is because you think you'll disappoint your wife, you'll get hungry enough to where you don't care. And you'll either start eating brownies in the dark, crying, hiding from your wife, which is an unfortunate way for the fitness industry to go, or you'll be like, honey, you know what? I blew my diet. Boom, I don't care anymore. Painful, difficult goals. Showing up to train. Training hurts. Dieting can be a real pain in the butt. That kind of stuff requires deep self-motivation, self-dedication, others holding you accountable. At some point, you're not going to care about them because you care about other people less than you do yourself. Fundamental fact of human reality. You care about yourself more than you care about anyone else in this world, maybe except for your children. Hopefully you're not having your children hold you accountable because they're 5 years old and they don't know what they're doing. So if you really want long-term motivation, and if your clients do, teach them, help them learn and grow to understand that the motivation has to come from within. I don't want this brownie because I have a goal. Goodbye, brownie. Not because my wife is a light sleeper and she might hear me chewing on it. So, in another way of putting this is to think about this. If you don't want something bad enough yourself, is anyone else really going to push you hard enough for it? If you don't want to do these 3 sets of 10 in the squat, who cares what this personal trainer is telling you? He's some 22-year-old kid. He trains all the time. You have a law firm to run. He doesn't know anything about stress or divorce or taxes. He just lifts weights all the time. I don't want to do this for him. But if you're self-motivated, none of that stuff even occurs to you. I'm going to squat this weight because that's what I came here to do. Not for anyone else, for myself. And that's a real good way to get motivated. It works a lot better. So, what's the trainer there for anyway? The trainer is there for the hard times, not all times. You might have that deep internal motivation as a client, but some days you don't have the energy. Some days you don't feel like it. Some days you're really depressed, you're really down, or some days you just got promoted and got a raise and you just want to go party instead. The trainer is there to be like, hey Bill, let's get in here and do this work. what do you say? And you go, crap, all right, let's do it. And after you shake his hand, you go, thank you, that was great. You're there as a trainer for the hard times, mostly as a teacher of technique, not as a motivator. Why? Because motivation is deep and internal. It doesn't come from around. If you think it does, you got another thing coming. So, long-term motivation has a couple of facts about it. It's highly intrinsic. It comes from within, not as much from external sources. The people that can exude long-term motivation most effectively, the most dedicated clients, their motivation reveals itself in a calm and constant manner. That is, they come in and they do work. And they do work with a calm and happy approach. They don't have to yell too often. They don't have to get super psyched up. They just come in and put in the work. They're on the grind. You might need to yell at clients before huge PRs, but otherwise keep things cool and happy. Because I'll tell you this, if you gotta yell at a client all the time for them to lift even bare minimum amount of weight, they're not gonna last. And that's just the fact of the matter. Clients that need tons of motivation all the time just don't last long, and it's essentially out of your hands. I wish it was in our hands to be huge motivators, but unfortunately it seems to be relatively impossible. Lastly, are tools against pseudoscience. There are a couple of them. Anytime somebody presents you with a claim, a lot of times it happens like this. A client will come in and say, hey, I heard about the intermittent paleo super fasting ketogenic diet. Should I try it? You have a couple of tools to work with, and they come in sequence. The first, caveat emptor, which in Latin means buyer beware. This one works really well for supplements, for example. Hey, I heard there's this new supplement that does all these wonderful things. Well, I'll tell you this. Companies will sell you anything you buy. Anything you're willing to pay money for, they will sell you, even if it does nothing. So, if you walk into a lot at General Motors, and it turns out that for them to paint a car blue is cheaper than for them to paint a car red, and you look at a blue car and you say, man, that's a great color of red, they'll go, yeah, sure is. You want this red car? You'll say, I'll take it. They just saved a ton of money because they don't have to put the expensive red paint on for you. They'll lie right to your face as long as you fall for it. But if you show up to the same car company and say, hey, I want a red car. These are all blue. They'll go, crap, and they'll have to paint it red for you. There's no way for them to get around it. So companies will provide you with what you want only if you know what you want. And if you know science and you know what you're after, you'll get it. If you walk into a GNC and say, hey, I want to get jacked. What should I buy? You'll leave with like 50 different things, one of which might do something. But if you walk into GNC and say, hey, show me to your whey proteins, they'll show you all their wonderful selection of effective and economical whey protein supplements, and you can buy one of them, whichever one you like. So, buyer beware. You have to look out for yourself. Companies will sell you anything they can. That doesn't make them bad. That's just the reality of the situation. Number two, know the logical fallacies. If you know the naturalistic fallacy, you know that anytime someone says, hey, I've got this organic, vegan, natural protein I got, what do you think? You say, man, they're probably overspending their money. So you might be able to guide your clients to make better choices, and you might yourself make better choices if you know those fallacies and you know not to get too far ahead of yourself. And the claim natural doesn't necessarily mean good. It certainly doesn't mean you're going to spend a lot more money on it than you otherwise would have. Number three, use your knowledge of the basic principles. If something violates overload, if you say, hey, I know this workout that can get you just as muscular using 5-pound dumbbells as you use with the 100-pound dumbbells for your chest presses, you got to be real skeptical of that. If it violates the variation principle, hey, I got one workout that you can always do and it'll give you limitless gains forever. Hold on a second, that doesn't make any sense. If it violates fatigue management, if you say, listen, you can train as hard as you want for weeks on end, you won't overtrain, I promise, that's a pretty bad thing. So if something violates the basic principles in dieting or in training, you gotta wonder about it. Here's a perfect example. You go through the aisle at the grocery store and you got these weird magazines, you know, Godzilla Found Alive and the Pacific, things like that. And some of them will say, you know, Women's Weekly World News, and it'll say, you know, eat as many calories as eat as much food as you want, still lose weight. I've literally seen that headline. You gotta be like, oh, what's our first nutritional priority? Oh yeah, calories in, calories out. Oh, hold on. If I can eat as many calories as I want and still lose weight, that means the priority is either false or the magazine might be lying to me. I wonder which one it is. So if it violates basic principles, probably not a great idea to go on. Sometimes all these filters are passed. So with a supplement like leucine, for example, leucine, you can buy pure leucine at the store, it's very cheap, so buyer beware, we'll take care of that one. It doesn't violate a logical fallacy or anything. Leucine's not very natural. No one says it's a natural cure for anything. It's pretty artificial. And the basic principles, leucine actually, theoretically, helps to accentuate muscle growth. So now you go, okay, it's past all these, maybe it works still. Then you go to the data. You look directly at the data on human long-term use of leucine as a supplement, and you ask the data, you look through literature reviews, and this is something you're going to do as a personal trainer. You won't have your clients do this. You'll do it for them, and you'll look and see, does leucine actually work? And currently, the position on leucine is maybe. So if your clients say, hey, should I take leucine? The answer is maybe, but I wouldn't get too hopeful. If you use all of these in the following sequence, very rarely do you actually have to go to the data, because a lot of claims are so absurd and they get refuted up the line over here. But every now and again, you'll have to go down to the data. Good benefit, you'll find out what works, and you'll learn for future use. That's all I have for you guys. See you next time for the last lecture.